I've learned that silence can be louder than applause. Sitting in my sunlit apartment in Manhattan, with floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the skyline back at me, I sipped my morning coffee and let the quiet hum of the city drown out my thoughts. The silk of my cream blouse brushed lightly against my skin as I leaned back, scanning the emails on my laptop. Everything about my life now spoke of control, polished, composed, untouchable. But the past has a way of tapping you on the shoulder when you least expect it. My phone buzzed on the glass table, vibrating against the crystal coaster. For a moment, I ignored it, half afraid, half curious. When I finally picked it up, my chest tightened. It was a wedding photo. My sister, Hannah, glowing in her white gown. And there, in the corner of the frame, was me, seated at the piano, fingers poised, eyes lowered. A moment captured forever, but not the way anyone else remembered it. The caption read, "Remember when you played at Hannah's wedding? Such a sweet memory." Sweet. That wasn't the word I would use. My throat tightened as I stared at the image, heat crawling up my neck. That day was supposed to break me. My mother made sure of it. She thought forcing me to play, unprepared, unwanted, would be my humiliation, the final nail in the coffin of the daughter who never fit her mold. What she didn't know was that my song erased her smile. Back then, I wasn't the woman who owned a skyline view or silk blouses. I was just Emily Carter, a 21-year-old girl who felt invisible inside her own family. My mother, Diane, had a way of looking at me that made me shrink an inch smaller every time, like I was some stubborn stain she couldn't scrub out. Hannah, my older sister, was her masterpiece. Hannah, with her perfect grades, her engagement to the charming fiancé, her effortless beauty that made heads turn. I was the shadow in her picture-perfect frame. Music was the only place I felt whole. I'd sneak into the living room late at night, fingers trembling over the piano keys, pouring into them the words I was too scared to speak. The sound would fill the house, and for a brief moment, I believed I belonged, until my mother's voice would slice through the air. "Emily, stop that noise. You'll wake the whole house." One night, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, fists pressed against my knees, tears streaking down my cheeks. My grandmother, Ruth, found me there. She wasn't like the others. She leaned on her cane, lowered herself slowly beside me, and handed me a small leather notebook. "Write your songs," she said softly. "Even if nobody listens now, one day the world will." That notebook became my lifeline. But the tension in our house grew thicker. Every family dinner ended with me silent, Hannah glowing, and my mother's sighs hanging heavy in the air. The breaking point came the week of the wedding. I just told my mother I didn't want to be part of the ceremony, that I felt out of place. She turned to me, eyes sharp as glass. "Oh, you'll be part of it," she snapped. "You'll play the piano. At least then you'll be useful for once." The words cut deeper than she knew. My hands shook for hours after. I wanted to refuse, but the truth was, I didn't have the strength yet. Not then. So I swallowed the humiliation, clutching that leather notebook in my room like it could shield me. Somewhere deep inside, though, something had already shifted. My mother thought she was breaking me. What she didn't realize was that she was forcing me to step out of her shadow. And the first note of that independence would be struck at Hannah's wedding. After the wedding, I left home with nothing but that leather notebook, my keyboard, and a suitcase that barely zipped shut. My mother thought it was another one of my dramatic phases. She'll come crawling back when she realizes she can't survive on her own. I overheard her telling Hannah. But I didn't crawl back. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, cracked ceilings, a leaky faucet, and walls thin enough that I heard my neighbors' arguments as clearly as my own thoughts. Still, it was mine. At night, I'd sit on the floor with my keyboard balanced on 2 milk crates, writing songs until my fingertips ached. Of course, chasing music wasn't glamorous at first. I worked double shifts at a coffee shop just to pay rent, smelling like espresso grounds even when I crawled into bed. Some nights, I'd come home with my feet throbbing, collapse on the mattress, and whisper to myself, "You're not giving up." The turning point came when I signed up for an open mic. My hands shook so badly, I thought I dropped my sheet music. But when I started playing, something shifted. People listened. Really listened. A woman in the front row closed her eyes and wiped a tear. Afterward, she came up to me, introduced herself as Clara Jennings, a retired music teacher, and said, "You have something rare. Don't you dare stop." Clara became the mentor I didn't know I was waiting for. She helped me polish my rough edges, taught me discipline, and pushed me past my own doubts. She was tough, but she believed in me in a way my mother never did. With Clara's guidance, I started landing gigs at small venues. The pay was barely enough for groceries, but the applause fed me more than food ever could. I remember my first paycheck from a real performance, just $150, but I held it like it was a winning lottery ticket. It wasn't the money. It was proof that my music had value. One song in particular, written straight from the pages of my grandmother's notebook, caught the attention of a local producer. He offered to record it for free, just to see where it could go. I posted the track online, not expecting much. Within weeks, it had thousands of streams. Emails poured in from strangers who said the song had healed something inside them. That was the moment I realized my mother's voice no longer defined me. I didn't need her approval, or her version of success. I was building my own. Still, I kept my victories quiet. When Hannah or my mother called, I kept conversations polite but vague. "I'm doing fine," I'd say, never mentioning the growing following, the recording sessions, or the late nights in studios with real producers. I wanted them to underestimate me, to think I was still the fragile girl they once dismissed. Because one day I knew the truth would land like a thunderclap, and I wanted to be ready when it did. The confrontation came years later, though not in the way I expected. By then, my life looked nothing like the cramped Brooklyn studio I once called home. I'd signed with a label, headlined shows in cities I used to only dream about, and even bought a penthouse in Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows, walls lined with framed gold records, a grand piano gleaming in the center, like a crown jewel. Yet, to my family, I was still just Emily, the quiet one. The day they walked into my world, it was almost cinematic. Hannah had called, her voice trembling. Their family business was collapsing, bad investments, mounting debt, and whispers of foreclosure. My mother, once so proud, so untouchable, needed help. Part of me wanted to hang up the phone. But another part, the stronger part, knew this was the moment I had been walking toward for years. So I invited them over. When the elevator doors opened directly into my penthouse, they froze. My mother's heels clicked hesitantly against the polished marble as her eyes darted around, taking in the space. Expensive art lined the walls, each piece carefully chosen. Shelves of books, vintage records, and photographs of me with world-renowned musicians filled the room. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and fresh lilies from a vase near the window. And then her gaze fell on the grand piano. I let them drink it in before I said a word. Finally, I smiled, gesturing toward the couch. "Please sit." They obeyed in silence. For once, my mother had no quick remark, no cutting sigh. Hannah kept twisting her wedding ring, eyes darting between me and the view of the skyline. I poured coffee into delicate porcelain cups, ironic since my mother used to scold me for not pouring hers correctly. Setting them down gently, I finally spoke. "You wanted to know how I've been." My voice was calm, steady. "This is my life now." My mother blinked, trying to recover her composure. "Emily, how did you afford all this?" I walked to the piano, trailing my fingers across the polished keys. "With the very thing you once called noise." The words hung in the air like a chord struck too hard. Hannah's jaw slackened. "Wait, you're Emily Carter?" Her voice cracked on my name, as if she were only now realizing that the singer-songwriter topping charts, the one she'd surely seen plastered across magazines, was her own sister. "Yes," I said simply. "That's me." The silence that followed was almost intoxicating. My mother's lips parted, then closed again, as though words had abandoned her for the first time in her life. Her face flushed, eyes glassy, with a mix of disbelief and something that looked dangerously close to shame. I let them sit in that moment, let them absorb it fully. Because for years, I had absorbed their dismissals, their sighs, their whispers. Finally, I leaned forward. You forced me to play at Hannah's wedding to humiliate me. You wanted me small, embarrassed, forgettable. My voice didn't waver. But that moment became my beginning. My song erased your smile, and the world decided to listen. Hannah swallowed hard, her hands trembling. My mother looked away, staring out at the skyline as though searching for an escape. But there was none, because this was my stage now. And for the first time, they were in the audience. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could hear only the faint hum of the city outside, the muted rhythm of traffic below. My mother finally cleared her throat, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Emily, we need your help. The words, once unimaginable, felt almost surreal in the air. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. I let her desperation settle, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted her to understand what it felt like to sit in silence, waiting for approval. What kind of help? I asked evenly. Hannah answered this time, her voice shaking. The business, it's gone. We made mistakes. Bad ones. We're drowning in debt. Mom thought maybe, since you've done well, you could. She trailed off, ashamed. I studied them both. For years, they held the power. They dictated who I was, who I wasn't, who I'd never be. Now they sat across from me, fragile, searching for mercy. And I had a choice. I will help, I said finally, watching their eyes widen with relief. But only under my conditions. My mother stiffened, her old pride flickering for a moment. Conditions? Yes, I said firmly, because I refuse to step back into the same patterns. If I give you my resources, then you must give me honesty.
Change.
Accountability. Hannah leaned forward. What do you mean? I turned to her first. Hannah, you've lived your whole life trying to be perfect for everyone else. I want you to pursue something that's just yours. Not for Mom. Not for appearances. For you. You once told me you loved photography, so go do it. Stop hiding behind a flawless image and start living truthfully. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, almost grateful. Then I turned to my mother. This was harder. Mom, you spent years controlling everyone around you because you were terrified of losing control yourself. You crushed me to keep me small because my freedom scared you. If I help you now, you have to stop treating people like extensions of your will. You need to listen, to soften, to let go. She bristled, opening her mouth, but I didn't let her interrupt. You humiliated me when you forced me to play at Hannah's wedding. You thought breaking me would make you stronger. But I became stronger without you. If you want my support now, you must face that truth and start treating me not as your failure, but as your equal. The silence afterward was heavy, but different this time. Not the silence of dismissal or shame, but of realization. Hannah reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it. My mother didn't look at me right away, but her shoulders slumped, the hard edges of her pride softening for the first time. I'll try, she whispered. That was enough for me. Not perfection, not instant transformation. Just the first crack in the armor she'd worn all her life. I leaned forward, my tone firm but warm. Then we have an agreement. I'll help, but only if we all grow from this. Because I won't let our family stay trapped in the same cycle anymore. This time, I wasn't the one shrinking in silence. I was the one setting the terms. And it felt powerful. Change didn't happen overnight. It never does. But in the weeks that followed our conversation, I started noticing subtle shifts. Hannah called me one morning, her voice bubbling with an energy I hadn't heard in years. Emily, I signed up for a photography class downtown. I don't know if I'll be any good, but I haven't felt this excited in forever. I could almost see her smile through the phone. It wasn't the polished, practiced smile she wore for others. It was real. And my mother, though still awkward in her attempts, began trying, too. She sent shorter texts, less commanding, more human. One simply said, I heard your song on the radio. It's beautiful. I'm proud. I read that message 3 times, my throat tightening with something I hadn't expected to feel, forgiveness slowly blooming. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like Emily Carter, whole, strong, and standing on my own terms. One evening, I sat at my piano with my grandmother's leather notebook in my lap. The edges were frayed now, the ink faded in places, but the words inside still pulsed with life. I traced her handwriting. Even if nobody listens now, one day the world will. She'd been right. The world had listened. And, maybe more importantly, so had my family. I closed the notebook gently, resting it on the piano. Outside, the city lights shimmered, each one a reminder of the path I carved for myself. A path born out of humiliation, but transformed into strength. That night I played, not for approval, not for survival, but for joy. Each note was a thread stitching the past and present together, weaving pain into resilience, silence into song. As the melody filled the room, I thought back to that wedding day, the forced performance meant to break me. Instead, it became the spark that lit everything that followed. And as my fingers moved across the keys, I whispered the truth I now lived by. My mom forced me to play at my sister's wedding to humiliate me, but my song erased her smile and built the life that finally set me free.